Check, 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 check. I think I'm live. Okay, today we're gonna be concise. We're gonna take a page, believe it or not, directly out of my journal, the Spiral Notebook, and we're going to answer this question, which I know you guys as creative people may wonder about this. How to master anything in 2 to 8 years. There's good news and bad news. The good news is this always works, and the bad news is there's no other way. This actually comes back to the discussion we had a little bit in the live stream last week, where we talked about some of the barriers in life, like having a regular job and things like that, that keep you from being able to achieve your goals, whatever that goal might be. And so I've really thought about this a lot in my own life and have learned some interesting things. Now, before we do this, right now I have no concurrent viewers, so people are going to, because I didn't warn you that there was going to be a live stream, some of you are cursing me right now because you're realizing that you didn't have warning that this live stream would occur. Folks, this is something I'm going to try to get better at, okay? So I promise. But this occurred to me today to share, and I just wanted to be spontaneous and roll with it. So, before I get into it, I'm going to come over here and kind of show you something. The other day I mentioned that I had taken the plunge and decided to purchase a set of water mixable oil paints, okay? So the idea is that I'm actually going to try oil painting. Most of my paintings in recent days, this is one of the more recent ones, was they're watercolors. Okay, watercolor's cool because it's very immediate, it's very visceral, and it's very unforgiving. Okay, probably like this would probably be one of the better watercolors I've done, I would say. So you know, I'm all over the map. Sometimes I succeed, sometimes I fail. But the order of the day today would be actually oil painting. So I want to show you what the progression over 3 days actually looked like. I did 3 portraits. Okay, so this is the first one. And this is a portrait of John Howard Sandon, who is arguably the most celebrated portrait artist of our time. You might say if you go back to the 19th century, the most celebrated portrait artist of the prior age would have been probably John Singer Sargent, who's a painter that's highly respected by John Howard Sandon. So this is an okay portrait of Sandon. This was done, as I say, with water-based oil paint. So Maria, if you show up and you're curious, I will tell you that I can't say enough good about the water-based oil paints. We'll just leave it at that. You get all the benefits of oil with the ability to clean up with water. Okay, so what makes it different from acrylics is they don't dry really quickly, so you can actually go in and work them. Okay, so now before I go any further, I'm going to take just a moment and check my YouTube channel to make sure that this live stream is in fact public. It looks like it is. Okay. Usually if like nobody shows up within a couple of minutes, I wonder if I accidentally set it to be unlisted or something like that. Looks like we have a playback too. Okay, so this was day 1. Okay, so now here's day 2. Day 2 is this cowboy. All right. So if you're a normal human being, and by the way, I tend to post my paintings on Facebook. I will tell you that without a doubt, based on the responses to the paintings, my assessment is pretty accurate. Where we go from, you're going from, oh, that's nice, to, whoa, that's pretty good, to, wow, that's, whoa. Okay, so this is day 2. Here's day 3. Okay, now you may, you may have a socio-political opinion about whether this was worth the time and paint that it required. I happen to think it was, but of course there were people who commented on my Facebook page who were like, yeah, it's a nice painting, but kind of a waste of paint. So I don't really appreciate that view, but I think that you will agree that the progression from literally one day to the next has been fairly substantial. And I think that's true. And the reason for it is I referred back to Sandon's book, which I actually created a video yesterday that I hope to post soon, where I actually went through a book that John Howard Sandon wrote about the process of portrait painting. Exactly. Capoi allo. I don't know how you say that, but thank you. Yeah, that's correct. Okay, so this is the progression. Let me show you one more time. We're going from this to this to this in 3 days. Whoops, there's an old Michelle picture I did, which wasn't very good. Sorry, I rolled my mouse wheel. I didn't mean to do that. By the way, that's an acrylic painting for those of you who are keeping score. Okay, so you probably agree, if you're a normal human being, that this is a pretty solid progression over 3 days. I'm understanding better what I did right, what I did wrong, and how to do it better going forward. Okay, so how does this help you guys? Here's the point, and we're going to go through the spiral notebook, my own journal, quite literally from this morning. I wrote this down, among a bunch of other things, but this was the takeaway that I thought would be of interest to my YouTube subscribers. So let's go here. Let's go to our view, full screen mode. And let's go tab so we can focus in on the canvas. So this is the spiral notebook. All right, so I'm just going to go through these principles one by one, because again, they really speak to something that we talked about here on the live stream last week about the barriers that are created by simply not having time or whatever your barriers are to being able to pursue your goal or your dream. Well, this is what I've learned. I started lifting weights New Year's Day 1983. And I say with good confidence that I still have my guns. And interestingly, most recently what I found is that less is more. Less is more. I'll get to that, but most of your progress you're going to see in anything is going to happen the first 20% of the time you put into it. And hence, guys who lift weights tend to put on 15 pounds the first year, and then maybe 8 pounds the next year, and then the progress tends to trail off. This has nothing to do with whether you take steroids and do, or creatine or other supplements to help you optimize your progress. But the general pattern is what I just described. Okay, so if weightlifting is a good model for progress of all kinds, then here's what we see. First of all, there's a preliminary you should consider, which is education and research as a preliminary helps a lot. If you can kind of look at your area of discipline, whether it's animation, whether it's painting, whether it's music, how do I say that? Nagut. There we go. I finally got it right after all these months. Nagut 40. Okay, so this is where you may have to you may have to seek out someone to help you, or you may have to read books or whatever. But what we see with lifting weights, with bodybuilding, is that number one, you can only improve just so quickly. Okay? It doesn't really matter how bad you want to be the next Mr. Olympia. The fact of the matter is that you can only improve just so quickly. So log that in your memory banks and trust me on this one, okay? I've seen this hold true in all different areas. So given that that's true, then how should we approach our craft? Number two, and this is again a problem we see with weightlifting, is that excessive practice, and the word practice is in quotes, but excessive practice actually leads to new peripheral costs. You incur new costs that were not part of the original equation. So you go and you do a set of bench presses or curls or whatever, and by the way, Zuko's over there chirping today. You want to knock it off, Zuko? Zuko, the African gray parrot, he's a little chirpier than normal. So if you hear a chirp in the background, ignore that. So, for example, if you lift weights and you're feeling good, you're pumped up, everything's going great, you say, I feel so good, I'm going to keep going, keep going, keep going, and I'm going to probably put on 10 pounds of solid muscle by tomorrow. Well, what happens is you impose on your ability to recover, and hence you actually harm your progress. Okay? Let's keep going. So what we see is that optimal results are generally the result of an easy pace but a steady one. In other words, consistency is more important than doing some kind of marathon and hoping you're going to get results quickly. Okay? Next principle. Therefore, please understand, there is no free lunch, there is no get rich quick. And actually, if you get a really rapid result, which you usually will when you're starting, because think about it as a percentages. Okay, from 0 to 100% of craft or mastery. Okay, when you're at 0, let's say you go from 0 to 1, and then you go from 1 to 2. Well, you just made 100% improvement. But if you go from 30 to 35, that's 5 notches, but it's only 1/6 improvement. So improvement always seems to trail off, and indeed it does trail off, as you gain ability. And I mention that because the problem you're going to have is that the good results you get early, which are perfectly normal and natural, will fool you into thinking that excessive practice is the pathway to mastery, when it's not. It's just that early in the process we always make progress fairly quickly. All right, let's keep going. There is a caveat to that. You can do the occasional marathon. If I'm if I'm feeling good and I really decide to hit it extra hard, sometimes that does boost things a little bit. It actually does provide a little bit of an improvement in progress. But my point is that that's not the normal case. That's the exception. It's something you do once in a while, and there's a really big reason. The occasional marathon generally incurs a higher recovery cost, which I have found in many different areas of discipline to basically be 3 days. If I do a really hard workout, I'm not ready to do it again tomorrow. It's going to take me about 3 days to bounce back. Okay? So, and I've found this with playing the piano. I may be playing the piano one day and I'm feeling, man, it's just flowing. I'm really nailing it today. I can do it. And so I go too far. I do too much. And what happens is next day, not only do I not feel like playing at all, but it's really typical that I can't, right? It's like, where'd it go? It kind of disappears. That's perfectly normal. So when you do the marathon, you incur a higher cost. Okay, so pacing or drafts, if you're a writer, if you think of it as I write a draft, I may write for an hour or two, and then I get away from it for a while, and I come back to it the next day. Okay? And you could call it sessions if you're doing animation like I do here on this channel. You aren't necessarily going to be doing it for 10 hours today, right? You might do it for an hour and a half. Well, that approach facilitates variety. And when I say variety, what I mean is you tend to come back and approach the thing with fresh eyes, and then you consider the following. Number one, the following solutions to problems. And by the way, that's the crux of improvement is nothing more than that. Nothing more or less. It's just identifying the problems and then finding the solution. What do I need to do differently in order to get better at what I'm trying to do? So you begin to approach problems creatively. In other words, you might try a different approach that didn't occur to you when you were in the midst of the marathon session, right? And that's perfectly natural, because when you're in the zone, there's always a tendency to overdo it and keep going, okay? But when you've got fresh eyes on the thing, by pacing yourself, you not only approach problems more creatively, but also pragmatically. In other words, you get the emotion out of it. Here's why. The emotion part is hugely important. Okay, so let's look at the opposite side of this story. Marathons, when you do the marathon session, or mentally and emotionally, if you have the mindset of trying to get results fast, which of course, anybody who's followed my channel for a while knows that I've been as guilty of this as anybody. I've put speed of execution over quality of execution too many times to mention. Okay? So I speak from experience here. When you do the marathon, there's a bunch of new costs that you incur. Number one, you got much greater time, energy, motion, and emotion invested because you put all this time into this thing. You've made the sacrifice. Maybe you decided to skip out on the date with your swim. The result, which means B, you have a much greater perceived cost of quote-unquote failure. When things go sideways and don't turn out as well as you hoped, it's like, oh my God, I just spent all this time. I actually I got to work late because I was so in the zone, and I just kept putting it off in my mind. So I left too late to get to work on time, and I got in a fight with my boss, and so you have these costs that you begin to incur that all flow out of being in denial about what actually works, which is pacing. This is in the long run, by the way. We're talking about the long game here. This is the approach to the stock market that says I'm going to buy and hold, because we know perfectly well that over the last 100 years, the stock market always has gone up in the long term. Okay. Anyway. So when you're in a hurry and doing a marathon, in other words, you're in denial of this idea of pacing yourself a bit, you're going to have the tendency to fall back to suboptimal or safe strategies for problem solving. In the animation space here on this channel, this is probably the cost that I've incurred the most. When you're more invested in other words, mentally and emotionally, if the cost of failure now is getting greater and greater and greater because you've got more and more and more and more time invested in a single session where you haven't gotten that distance from it to be able to think more pragmatically about, fresh eyes. You look at it with fresh eyes and go, oh, now I see what I did. That happens all the time. I've seen it in writing. I've seen it in music. I've seen it in animation, etc. And then what happens is also, if things start really going sideways, you're likely to panic, and then you're even more likely to fall back on safe strategies that lead you to do this. Repeat mistakes. You wind up making the same mistakes you've made over and over again, and you tend not to improve. Okay? So it leads to an overall assessment of non-improvement. Well, that's not what you want. You actually want to improve. You want to do like I absolutely do see with my oil paintings, is even over 3 days with 3 paintings that each only took about 2 hours, I see palpable improvement. I think largely because I did it, then I got away from it, came back the next day and tried again. Okay. So most progress in any case happens in the first 20% of effort, no matter what it is that you're doing. No matter what you're into, most of your, I'm trying to find the sweet spot here as far as our zoom on the screen. Most of your progress will always happen in the first 20%. Okay? So, we see that in areas where physical limits force you to be incremental in your pacing, these principles always hold true. So that's why I used weightlifting as an example, because it's a great example of something where there are literally physical limits to how much you can do today. And if you try to defy those limits, you could injure yourself, or you're going to overdo it. At the very least, you're going to have a longer recovery than normal. Okay. And emotion, meaning anxiety, hurry, self-deception, these things only harm your progress. Now, you'll still make progress. Let's be clear. You will still make progress. But A, it takes longer, and B, you're kind of miserable along the way, comparatively speaking. So let's keep going here. Okay, so I had a little caveat I wanted to throw in, because this is something I've been guilty of. Inspiration that breeds confidence is inferior to education implemented. Okay, so this is something I've been very guilty of because I am a totally like self-taught kind of guy. Okay, wasn't educated to animate, wasn't educated to do cartooning, animation. I did read Richard Williams' book, you know, but it really didn't affect my process too much. So when I say inspiration that breeds confidence, this would be, for me, this would be the guilty pleasure of observing someone who's a master craftsman at whatever it is I'm trying to do. And what happens is emotionally I say, oh man, I see you can do it. I believe I can do it. You know, I can do this. Well, that's useful, but it's not as useful as actually educating yourself about the parameters and the options and the methodologies that are most effective, that have been proven most effective in your discipline, and then trying it. Implementing, in other words, it's good to learn by trial and error, but it's better to learn from an expert. Okay? I don't consider myself an expert at much of anything, frankly, although this unpacking of the human condition and what works in regard to gaining mastery at things is something that I pretty much have down pat. And hence, I don't know that I've ever become a master at anything, but I'm very good at sales. I'm very good at composing music. I'm okay at animation. I'm very good at writing screenplays and stories. I'm not bad at painting. You know, I'm a very, very mediocre piano player. But that's been, I've been good enough to be dangerous so that it helps with what I actually care about, which is composition and basically making music more than performing it, right? That's just a matter of preference. Anyway, here we go. Thus, to be a master requires three things that are very, very important. Let's just take a half a second and unpack these. It requires faith, consistency, and patience. Okay, so what I mean by faith is that in your heart of hearts you truly believe I've got this. I will get to where I'm trying to get to. That's really important. If you don't have that confidence, then what you tend to do is experiment with different methodologies that you hope will give you the fast result, and almost never do. And as I kind of alluded to earlier, even if they do, all that does is trick you into forming a neuroassociation that tells you that the short path is in fact the correct path when it's not. Okay, so it's important that you have faith in the process. Number two, consistency. Okay, so in other words, hitting it really hard for 8 hours a day is not, it's not only not necessary, it's not even desirable. Okay, now I'm not talking about the work. You know, you say, well, I go to work for 8 hours a day. I have to be at work 8 hours a day. Yeah, but you know what? We got plenty of science that shows us that most people's productivity in their job is optimal for about 90 minutes a day. That's it. You're actually optimal for 90 minutes a day. And then you're at the water cooler, or you're getting back from lunch, or you're trying to figure out how to mitigate the fact that you're tired after lunch. All in, on and on it goes. The way we implement the idea of a work day, at least here in the West, is very stupid. It's very non-optimal. It doesn't do a great job of helping people be the best they can be, because it encourages them to be extremely mediocre to crappy for about 80% of the time that they're at work. But there's nothing I can do about that. So it is what it is. That's one of the reasons why I'm glad I work for myself. Anyway, you have to have faith in the process. It's better to be consistent than thinking that you have to do these long marathons and that there's all this stuff you've got to do before you can really start. These are just stories we tell ourselves. Therefore, of course, you must be patient. You must be patient with yourself, which will not happen if you don't have the faith. And then if you don't execute with consistency. Okay? So, what will help with this is this. Your process, when your process is supplemented by critique and education, in other words, all along the way as you're practicing your craft, whatever it is, it's good to get critique. I spelled critique wrong. That's embarrassing. I left the U out. I was writing fast. What can I say? And Nagut says, yeah, I get really cocky with believing I can do stuff expertly that I've never done before. Well, but that's okay to a degree. That's the faith part. If you believe you can do it, then that's a really good starting point, but it's only a starting point because you want to have the optimal methodology. Okay, so the good news in all of this is the fact that it always works. The bad news is there's no other way. So, when I think it was Amar who was commenting the other day, we were talking about some of these things on the live stream, and he was basically talking about the fact that the need to pay the bills is an impediment to achieving his goal. That is a legitimate complaint for sure. But at the same time, as I thought about it more and more, I also thought, well, actually, the ideal methodology that gets you to your goals actually as quickly as possible in terms of your mastery of your craft, okay? Not necessarily your income level or not necessarily the opportunities. That's a whole skill of its own, developing opportunities and then seizing upon them when the opportunity arrives. Setting that aside, my point is that in your area of mastery that you're going to build your career or your goal upon, this methodology that is more measured and more incremental actually works better. It's not just a satisficing matter of saying, well, this is what we're stuck with. No. Weightlifting proves this is actually the optimal way to proceed. And most people, especially young people, because they're in a hurry, of course, are very resistant to the measured approach. So I have a whole lifetime behind me of finding out actually this turns out this is what works best. Okay, so supplement along the way with critique and education and pretend there's a U in the word critique along the way to truthfully assess what needs improvement. And truthfully is the operative term here. Okay, there basically is no room for ego. And I've been as guilty of this as anybody. And the reason I've been guilty of it, by the way, is because actually, here's the reason I've been guilty of it. If we go back here, it's B. It's this right here, the perceived cost of failure. So the problem is, you've in my case, you've put literally months into creating this cartoon. Okay, so we'll pick on Salt and Light as an example. You put months into doing this cartoon, and then you begin to sort of reel it out there and let people, hey, dead pianist, you let people begin to issue forth their opinions and comments about how you're doing. And this hasn't actually happened a lot, but it's happened a few times where somebody has some fairly negative criticism. Well, on the one hand, yes, you do need to consider the source. Okay, I think about I won't name names, but there's one person who's often on the live stream who is extremely opinionated on the one hand, but is often right on the other. And if I'm going to be honest, I have to acknowledge that person's opinions and take it into account if, in fact, they're a reasonably knowledgeable source. Now, when it comes to the aesthetics of a piece of music, of an animation, all that kind of stuff, a child qualifies. Because the fact of the matter is, people either like it or they don't. And that's perfectly valid. And if they don't, then your job is to unpack what went wrong. Why doesn't it have the level of appeal or quality that would have, made everyone likewise agree that this is awesome and amazing. So again, I've seen the same thing over here in taking this incremental approach to oil painting. I just started oil painting literally this week. Okay, I went out and bought the water mixable oil paints. And I'm going to show it again because we're a little later into the live stream here. And I want to show you what I did, particularly if Maria comes around, because she was asking me how did the water-based oil paints come out. When I approached them, I couldn't find any negative information. Like every review was like, these are amazing. It works just as advertised. They handle just like traditional oil paints, but yet you can clean them up with water. So I'm like, okay, we'll give that a crack. So this was literally a 3-day progression where each painting took 2 hours. Okay. Painting number 1, John Howard Sandon, our nation's most beloved portrait painter, actually, ironically. Not the greatest portrait of him, but it's an okay likeness. It actually captures him okay. That was the first day. The second day, this. Okay, whoops, I'm sorry. The third day, this. Okay, so obviously there's no accounting for opinion. Opinions matter. But what I found, and I have actually found consistently on Facebook, is if I post a painting on Facebook, it has held very true that if it's a painting that I know darn well is good versus a painting that I know is like okay, the comments reflect that. Like everybody gets good versus okay. So in other words, for example, what would be a great example here would be this painting got an extremely enthusiastic response. And it's kind of interesting because it's very loose, it's very fluid, it's very impromptu, but yet it's got this life to it. Okay, now the comments for that were vociferous, okay? The comments for this, let me find it. Kita, where are you? Oh, don't tell me Kita's not in here. The painting of Kita is not here. I apologize, guys. Another example of that would probably be, let me see another example. I don't know. By comparison, probably something like this. Although that one's kind of middling. It's kind of in the middle. So, hey Maria. So Maria, you're here now. Did you see the progression with the water-based oil paints or the water mixable oil paints? Did you see that, or do you want me to re-show that progression? This is a progression over 3 days, 3 portraits, all done in about 2 hours. So if you could please post a comment. By the way, I see you've changed your YouTube icon. So you just came in. Okay, so if you guys who have been here for a bit will forgive me, I'll just show this really quick because it was Maria Torres specifically who had asked me to let her know how I felt about the water mixable oil paints. And my assessment is they're just as cool as one might hope. Okay, so this was the progression, and I'll just show it really quick. I'm not going to go over the diatribe from the spiral notebook that took a half an hour, but as far as the paintings go, this was day 1. This would be 3 days ago. Portrait of John Howard Sandon, who is, as I said, probably our most beloved portrait painter. He's the guy you call when you want to paint the president. Okay, so this was day 1. I looked at Sandon's book. I reviewed some things. I thought about it. I came back the next day and painted this guy. Okay, so this would be day 2. Okay, I don't think anyone's going to argue that's a little bit of an improvement. Okay, so this was last night, day 3. Okay, so in terms of capturing the methodology of really good portrait painters like Sandon, this is by far the best of the 3. As far as being a better likeness, it probably is, again, by far the best of the 3. No one has failed to recognize who it is, although, as I said earlier, on Facebook there are detractors who said it was a waste of paint, which I don't agree with, but there you go. You know, people are welcome to their opinions. So clearly you've got this progression over 3 days, where I think it proves out that an incremental approach to creativity is a good thing. And so again, this is all from the Spiral Notebook. If you guys really want to study it, you can take a screenshot of this, But this is, as I said, I want to emphasize the good news is you, meaning you, can master anything in 2 to 8 years. That's the good news. The bad news is that it's going to take 2 to 8 years. Okay. So, again, I'm just leaving this on the screen so you can take a screenshot. And thanks, Maria. I appreciate that. I generally know when it went well and when it went poorly. And for me, there's no question. There's a good, steady progression. And by the way, one of the biggest things I learned from Sandon is early in the process, what really made this painting unique compared to the others was that on this one, this was pretty much just a mess, really. I was kind of almost, man, it was a mess. So we'll skip that one. With this one, I actually drew it first, largely on the canvas with, I think, Payne's Gray. And so I worked out from the drawing. Whereas with Joe, I actually did not draw. I never drew a picture. What I did was I just started applying the color and then thinking about modeling the volumes and the shapes with value. So it literally was building out color, building out value. And oh my gosh, the last hour was nothing but correcting things. And for anybody who's going to do oil painting or similar, don't underestimate the value in time. It's going to, is it Walt Whitman? Okay, that's, you know what, Maria, I hope you're joking because it's, I'm not even going to say who it is. Somebody already guessed who it was in the chat, but oh, I know who you're talking about. This guy. You're asking if that's Walt Whitman. I know this is just some old guy who it was just. I think I searched old man. I just searched old man. So Dead Pianist asked the question, how long have you been doing animation? Basically, I would say 3 years. It was in 2018 that I basically said, okay, I put this off for 30 years. Instead of making another live action movie, I want to dovetail into animation. I've always wanted to do animation even from high school days, and so why not go ahead and do that at this stage of life? And so so I started in 2018. I knew there was going to be a bit of a learning curve. I've made innumerable mistakes along the way. So I'm on my other screen trying to get Krita out of here. And so I'm going back here. And so yeah, I started in 2018. I worked on the Akari anime concept for essentially a year, you know, as I was learning. And so that was, we'll transition back over here. So that was this. This is what I was working on when I started Salt and Light. So I'll just kind of drag through this. This is actually, you know, pretty good. Somebody actually posted a comment today asking where they could see this. And I want to say, I will say right now that my intent at this point is to actually release this on YouTube, like 5 minutes at a time. So I want to go ahead and get the score in there. It will be a subtitled anime where we'll just take nonsense dialogue from other anime just so the voices are kind of close but are in Japanese. And I have no idea what they're saying, but just put basically voice placeholders in there for fun. And then let it be subtitled and go ahead and put this show out there one little piece at a time. And yeah, Dead Pianist, many people have said this. Many people have said, you know, when can we see this thing? I mean, it's really cool, actually. If you look at how it starts out, it's got a really nice feeling to it, where we see this monastery. I don't know why monasteries keep coming up in my cartoons, but and we meet Akari and blah 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 blah. So, like everything, this of course has plenty that needs to be fixed and adjusted and improved. But yeah, it's original. It's actually my beautiful wife Valerie wrote it, is writing it, and so And this was an interesting case study because it was literally a soap opera in the sense that we're making it up as we go along, although she had an idea in her mind of what the story was and where it was going. Okay, so she's busy writing a book right now, uh, which is she's making really great progress on. So, and I love this show. I actually love this show. I love the character, and I want to definitely do something with it. But when the opportunity or the potentiality of Salt and Light as a concept came up with my film distributor, it just became, it's like, okay, if that's the right thing for the marketplace in terms of his ability to get a product out there and sell it and all the rest, blah blah blah, then we'll just shift gears towards that. And so hence I went ahead and I love that part where this is kind of funny. The big fight situation and her dress rips. And all the guys are like, ooh, It's such a little, it's a little naughty. But basically, pretty much good, clean fun. So, and I basically got to 8 minutes of this. This got to 8 minutes, and then I shifted gears to this other thing. So, as you can see, there's definitely some anime idioms in there, and that's what Val wanted. She wanted something that was essentially an anime, and so that's that. I'm not going to save that. So over here today, it was not my intention to do an animation live stream, so I'll just kind of show maybe a little bit here what the progress has been offline the last few days. Because what I'm doing is I'm going through episode 1, and let's go back to here. I'm basically redoing shots. I mean, there are shots that are just, like that one was just redone. New. That's old, and that's pretty much going to stay. That looks pretty good. So I'm going through here, and I'm finding background paintings that are not quite working. Characterization that's off. This is the order of the day. And so this shot here was just redone. Oh, wait, I'm sorry, not that one. Not that one. This one coming up here, just redid that shot. Now that's young Golic, so those who are wondering why he looks a little different, it's because he's 20 years younger in this stuff. This is the flashback that sets up the whole epic, right? And no, that was Blender 2.81a, so it is old. It's about, I don't know, 3 years old maybe. So this shot was just redone. This shot was not redone. This shot is being redone even as we speak. So what is this? Well, this is Golic. This is in the context of the montage where Golic is convincing Vespigi, young Vespigi, to usurp the throne. And so yesterday I actually reanimated this. I wanted to do a better job with Golic of showing. So what's happening is the camera's pushing in as you see this shot, and there's narration over top of it. So this is just part of a montage where he's basically saying you could be king, in essence. So I wanted to do a better job of doing the acting part of it with Golic. So anyway, that's what's actually in progress today. And I did this pencil test yesterday. And so I think what I'll do is so why am I expected to believe an untrained woman could beat a trained man? Are you talking about Akari? How she manages to duke it out with, I think, 5 guys at the same time? Is that what you're talking about? I don't know what you're talking about. Why am I an untrained woman could beat a trained man? Can you clarify your question a little bit? I'm not sure what I may be lacking context here. So importantly with this sequence, by the way, speaking of the incremental approach, this is a good example of where if you actually go through the pencil test, I had this in here and wound up discarding it and redoing it as having him turn his head and put his hand out this way. So these things do evolve. But yeah, as far as the Blender version goes that the edit was in, and that edit, by the way, for those who care, if you want a free video editor, Blender works pretty well actually. Um, it's a movie trope that really bugs me. Like they have trained assassins get beat up by a small, frail woman with no training. Okay, so Smog in 11 is actually giving us a good example right now of what I was talking about earlier in the Spiral Notebook about critique. Meaning that Smog 11, Smog in 11, Smog 911. It's Smog 911. Okay, Smog 911 is basically saying, okay, you got this show, and then you got this scene where the small frail girl manages somehow to beat up the guys. And God, I've seen that over and over and over again. Gee, you know, we saw that coming. Okay, so to Smog 911 I say, yeah, you're right. You know what? That's a fair criticism. However, there's also a little bit of context that justifies that choice. Okay? Number one, we're 2 minutes into the show, and we are deliberately establishing for the audience that there's more to this girl than meets the eye. And that point does need to be made. Number two, we also established in the shots leading up to the battle part of it that the one ninja was an incompetent nincompoop. Okay? Now you could argue, well, yeah, I've seen that before too. Well, yeah, of course we all have. We all are familiar with the idea of the competent practitioner who's accompanied by a bumbling oaf who basically makes things go wrong. That's the reality of the situation. And so the problems that occur are caused partly by the oaf. All right? So it isn't ridiculous that the oaf would maybe make some mistakes that would make it easier for an opportunistic and somewhat talented Akari to be able to make a good showing for herself. Number three, she doesn't win the battle. Okay? You might be assuming she wins the battle. She doesn't. She gets a leg up for like 10 seconds, and then they capture her. So, with all those things said, okay, say Smog, that's fine. It's also kind of in different shows, like the guy fights the demon overlord, then gets beat up by someone who never really fought before. Well, I mean, let's face it, guys. If you wanna chase Smog's criticism of genre, if you will, I would say absolutely, you're right. The other side of it is this. Entire shows that are extremely successful, like Yu-Gi-Oh!, are built on that. Are built on the idea that every single episode, the heroes get soundly defeated, about 4/5 of the way through, and then at the last minute, somehow, they always manage to go ahead and prevail. So, I'm not excusing that. I'm not calling that good storytelling. But at the same time, the marketplace does seem to enjoy it for some bizarre reason. So there's you can look at it both ways. And I think the criticisms are 100% valid. In the case of Akari, though, not so much. And I understand. I wasn't assuming that she won. You saw the ending. Okay, yeah, because she just basically got a couple good shots in. That's all. She kicked the guy in the nuts, as I recall. Right. It's about like the overuse of the tough guy getting beat up to show the danger. Right. So these are all criticisms. And by the way, this is at the risk, Smog, give me a little bit of a safe zone here, Smog, because what I'm about to say might sound like I'm arguing or criticizing you. Okay. But I want to make this point because I think it's kind of important. I don't want this to constitute defending what might be a lack of craft on my part or a lack of quality in how I execute. Okay? But having said that, so don't take it that way. Don't take it as me defending myself, okay? Because I totally accept your criticism. But I had a criticism the other day on it was kind of a criticism regarding the piece that the YouTube video that I posted a couple days ago that was about music composition, and the guy was making a case about the sounds that was actually a perfectly valid case. In my response, I basically said, "Yeah, everything you're saying, I agree with actually, but when you consider all the other considerations that led me to do what I did in this case, this is why I did it the way I did. Everything you're criticizing is right." And after he leveled all these criticisms, in my response, I acknowledged all of them, and then I said this. I said, "But feel free," because he was extolling the virtues of very expensive sound libraries. And he even said in his comment that he had all of these different sound libraries. So I acknowledged that. That's great. So at the end of my comment, what I said was, "And by the way, feel free to send me a link to your work and your credits." Okay, now I say this a little bit smugly as a guy who has in fact created multiple feature films, scored multiple feature films. My work is out there. So I said, show me your stuff, and I'd even love to interview you on my YouTube channel, right? Let me see what you've done with all these amazing libraries that make your job so much easier, which is a fair question. Well, what was the response? Could be for a million different reasons, but the response was actually, unfortunately, here we are 3 days later, the response I expected, which was no response at all. Okay, well, what do you do with that? What do you do with it? So anyway, but no, your criticism is absolutely valid though, Smog, for sure. Basically, what's going to happen with any show or any story is you're going to have some things that are tropes that serve a dramatic purpose, where it's actually the right solution at the time, because it's a little tiny piece of the story. So you just say, well, we'll just do it that way. But if you can go back and kind of reverse things or flip them around and come up with a new twist, of course, that's better. Absolutely. So he says, if it makes sense to use a trope, then I can accept it, but overuse just bugs me. Yeah, so then the question becomes, in that little anime thing, did what I did constitute overuse? Who knows, man? I personally thought, and here's the thing. The method of execution can matter too. In other words, if you have a trope in the sense that, okay, the weak girl overcomes the big tough guy. Okay. If that trope is told in an entertaining way this time, then you can kind of get away with it, right? So my friend's solution was to have it look like it was going to use the trope and then flipped it into a realistic outcome. Absolutely, and I like that. That is a perfectly, it's a really good creative solution to the problem you're describing, for the simple reason that it actually, by having the realistic result, is a surprise. And anytime you can surprise your audience, that's when you delight your audience, is when there's a little bit of something they didn't see coming. So you can mix what they do see coming with what they didn't, and you wind up being successful as a storyteller, by judiciously making those choices. So anyway, it's all good, man. It's all good stuff. Okay, so what we're going to do is, since I'm here and since I'm working, I gave a half an hour to the Spiral Notebook. I've pretty much almost given a half an hour to chit-chatting. And now I guess in the third half hour, let's do some ink and paint, baby. Let's do it. So what I'm going to do is hit the B key. And now what I'm going to do also is fall back on trying to do less chatting with the chat and more just describing precisely what I'm doing in the process of creating animation. Okay, and I'll try to also elucidate things that I see that may be problematic. So that said, let's actually take a look here at Golik and say, okay, let's talk about what's working, what's not working. We're taking the pragmatic approach. Okay, we see that there's some shake in his face because that's actually a duplicated frame. So we can either use that or not use it, actually, when we do the ink and paint. We can ink it twice, which will put a chatter in it, which might actually look good, or we can just cut and paste and use the head from both shots. Either way would work. Maria says, heads up, I may have to pop out for a few minutes to host a theater meeting. No problem, Maria, no problem. Do what you got to do. Okay, so I think, and we do not hear any dialogue here. And again, as described earlier, what you actually will see in the show is going to be this. Okay, so basically what happens is the narrator is saying that the famine kicked in. Golek says this is Asher's fault, but how is this possible? He feeds the poor. He's such a good guy. And then here we see Golek convincing Vespigi to usurp the throne. He plants the idea in Vespigi's mind, and then we see a 3-painting montage with soldiers and horses in the background, sound effects, illustrating the current king, Valner, being usurped as he falls over the cliff. Now Vespigi is the king, and 20 years pass. Okay? That's the context of what we're talking about. And then what actually happens is we're only 2.5 minutes into the show, and now the real show begins. And then this is where we meet Melchizedek. Okay? Get it? So this is the shot we're working on. And I mainly illustrated that to remind you guys that this is happening in the context of a montage. What matters here? What matters is seeing visually, with no dialogue, even though his mouth is moving, no dialogue, understanding that this is Golek convincing Vespigi to do something bad. Okay? Making sense? Cool. All right, so in that sense, I'm basically okay with it. Little bit of a problem with, okay, this is a tween, so we can kind of get away with it. Here, I would say let's zip in here, and let's just kind of reference our first shot here. Okay, if we want to enforce a little consistency, the shortest path to that actually would be to do this. Because this is essentially the same head. So why don't we just take this head, Control C, pop it in here, S key, Control V, and then what we're going to do is go up here to the H, which is horizontal, make it negative, and then put his head up like this, as if he's directing Vespigi's attention to the stars, to the wonderful fate he could experience if only he would usurp the throne from his brother. I think that's probably a pretty solid way to handle it. Okay, so File, Save All. Be back soon. Right on, Maria. Okay, so having done that, we can see several components of this shot that will probably be reused. First and foremost, Golek's head. And so what is very obvious to me, you know, we could re-ink it and recolor it multiple times. But man, I'm actually thinking other than that tween, we're probably going to be best off to just do the head once. Maybe, maybe not. We'll see. So I'm going to go ahead and bring the opacity of this down and hit the B key and just create a smart raster level. Now this is going to be the part that's really, really important. On my other screen, what I'm going to actually do here is I'm going to find, I think this would be good. I'm going to use a shot of Golek. In fact, I thought I had a closer one. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so I'm going to use that picture of Golek as a bit of a guide here. His characterization's somewhat simplified because he's a lot smaller on the screen, and there is a case to be made for stealing that shot. Let's see. Let's consider that. You know what? As long as we're being pragmatic, let's do it. I am literally on my other screen taking a screenshot. Okay, I'm gonna cheat. Let's just cheat and see how it goes. It's worth a try. Okay. So what do I mean by cheat? Well, I'm actually going to take this shot of Golek from the close-up. I don't really want to mess with his garment, and obviously we don't need the background. So I'm going to quite literally chisel this out and see if we can reuse it. If we can, we can. If we can't, we can't. It's no big deal. But it's going to cost me a couple minutes to try. So why not? one of the things one of the potential gotchas with doing this is that the outlines might not be bold enough. And clearly this version of Golek's head is way more detailed. And so for that reason it might not work. But as I said, the cost of trying is pretty low. And not only that, but we also can, I'm hitting shift, I'm hitting control spacebar. Just flip this around. Okay, well, what just happened? That's interesting. Let me go N key. Let's try that again, shall we? Okay, and then shift spacebar. So yeah, it's gonna, as I say, it's gonna take me like 2 minutes to clean this up. And that's it. Basically, we're done. So let's zip out. Is there anything else we got to erase? Yes. Actually, there's a lot we need to erase. So let's just lasso all of this. And now we have a Golek head that we can try using. So, a couple quick tweakies would be to say, let's hit the B key here. And boy, oh boy, this is going to have to be smaller. Let's drop that down to 0. And then what I'm going to do is hit the R key and sample his eye color and actually paint out his pupils because they're going to be looking in the wrong direction, probably. Okay, so step 1 in adapting this to the current scene is going to be to select it and once again hit the old horizontal and flip it around. So we'll just flip it around. Of course, we could have used the animate tool for that. But honestly, looking at it here, I have a feeling this is going to work. And so if we're going to do that, I'm actually going to hit undo. And if we're going to do it, we might as well, I'm just thinking we might as well use the animate tool. So let's hit the A key. We want to look at the scale. And again, what we're going to do is we're going to flip it on the horizontal. Okay, there I can see a couple problems in the picture that we need to fix. So let's hit the old eraser again. Actually, that was the select tool. Okay, and then we're just going to scale this down, and we'll scale it instead of scaling the actual art, we're just going to scale the level. So clearly his head's going to have to be on its own level. Okay, okay, Smog, have a good one. You're probably already gone, actually, but okay, so now what we want to do is set the center, and the center would be wherever his head's going to rotate. So let's just go ahead and test that. I like it. I'm liking what I'm seeing. And now what we could do is we could go into this and we could make our outlines bolder. We could basically punch this up a little bit, and we need a pretty dark color. So let's go ahead and punch this up. I'm glad I'm doing this actually because I've been thinking about the utter and complete stupidity on my part of not using character model sheets, and increasingly people have asked me about that. I think I got pretty lazy about it in the Krita phase, back when I was doing more work in Krita, because I was finding it so quick and easy to reuse. I would just reuse components from another scene like I'm doing here. And it was just so easy to do that I didn't need character model sheets so much. Okay, so in this case what I'm going to do is I'm going to darken his eyes a little bit. Okay, and I'm going to sample this color. I'm going to go ahead and take a little liberty here with the still image. Just because I can, you know, as long as we're here, why not? I want that to be a little darker and maybe a little less saturated. Yeah, that feels about right. Because in some earlier shots we do have Golek's eyes being, you know, they almost have a purpleness to eyelids actually. N key, yeah, that feels pretty good. Okay, another thing about this that we need to do is we're going to want to put in a mouth. So for that reason, let's just grab the flesh tone right there, zoom in, and let's just erase, oops, hit the B key, and then let's just erase his mouth. And then we'll, now I don't really love that brush. I think I'll just go with the standard brush actually. So again, R key, and then just hit the B key, and I guess we'll give this a little bit more dynamic range. Okay, so now if you look really closely, you can see one of the flaws that goes with working with raster levels in OpenTunes. If you look really closely, you can kind of see through. I mean, like the idea that, I mean, the opacity set to 100%, and yet I'm having to really scrub over this. And it's, I don't believe it's so much because of the color as it is because of the alpha. In other words, it's just the way something about the way it handles transparency is a little winky. And I hate to say this, but for our purposes, we're going to get away with it. It's less than optimal. If you look really close, you can see his mouth. Now, if I really wanted to fix it, probably what I'd do is I would actually erase this whole region here, grab this flesh tone, and then refill it. And again, I guess I need to hit the shift key. Yeah. So it fills it a little more aggressively. So that did a better job of hiding the problem. Okay, so now we can come back here, go back down to our outline color, and like I said, I'm just going to punch up the outlines to where if we were using a picture of Golek that was actually this size in the show here, we would probably not want outlines that were this bold, but because he's being shrunk down so much, yeah, that looks way better. Okay, and Maria's back. Hey, Maria. Okay, so now it is my judgment that I have done a good job here. And we are going to go ahead and animate this through with our tools and even allow a little bit of tweening to occur. So here we're going to, and by the way, I want to check one thing. If I hit the animate tool, I want to look at this. Okay, so now here we have a problem. This is global key. This is really, really important to understand. What this means is that when I set my first keyframe, it did not set keys for every animatable property, and usually you do want that on the first frame. It's hard to describe and unpack why it's so important, but so I think in this case I'm just going to say trust me. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to rotate it, I'm going to move it, I'm going to scale it, and I'm going to set the center. So, oh, that's not what I meant to do. I didn't mean to do shear. By the way, experiment with that. You guys may discover, as I have, that using the shear capability gives you a lot of interesting deformation possibilities. Okay, so now this keyframe needs to be deleted. I didn't realize I was on the wrong frame there. All right, and so now what we're going to do is, boom. Okay, so for clarity, I'll go ahead and lower the opacity of this so I can see what the heck I'm doing. Another option here is to hit the All key, or All option on the Animate tool so that you actually have a widget that allows you to affect the scale, rotation, etc. all in one fell swoop. Okay, so he goes down like this, but then he pops back up. That's interesting. So I guess we'll go with something like that. It seems like a lot of movement in a short period of time, but it kind of works. L key, yeah, that's fine. I don't like the positioning of it though. I want to bring it up a little bit and maybe rotate it back just a skosh. And here Again, I'm allowing myself to get a little bit creative with the animation to maybe make it even slightly better than it was. This key is probably going to want to be repeated. I'm going to have to turn this off so I can see what I'm doing. What did his face do? Okay, so his head didn't move. Okay, so his head doesn't move until we get here. Okay, so now this is going to be an interesting question, is whether we need to, can we get away with not doing the tween? What we're probably going to have to do is actually just have a blank frame and draw an extra head, probably in the other, in the body column, just to deal with the one tween frame, because this is now going to be 100 instead of negative 100, and as you can see, that fouled up some things. But that position looks good. I like that. Whoops. So we'll go here, and we want to be in all modes so that we can then go like this. So now the question becomes, how would you do a tween if you were going to not draw this? Okay. At 12 frames per second, it's easier actually, because you can actually use squash and stretch very kind of cleverly to make this work. But let me show you what that would look like. All right. So I'm going to go back here and crank up the opacity. So again, to be clear, what we're doing is we're trying to economize by saying, is there a way to tween his motion? Okay, look at what just happened. Okay, yeah, that's fine. That's because of the switch to 100% here. Let's delete that key for the moment, and let's just look at how this might look. So I might go like this. And then I'm going to hit undo here. I believe I want to hit control. Okay, wrong. Shift, wrong. That's what I want. Okay, so I'm actually imposing a little bit of a stretch. Okay, a stretch with the rotation. By the way, to be clear, I'm not 100% sure this is going to work, but I'm just showing you kind of what the breakdown might be. Okay, so this is actually a squash. Okay, and here's where I'm going to scale it 100%. 100. And then to make sure everything's back to normal, we'll change that to exactly 100%. And so you can see he's totally in the wrong position now. Okay, and I'm actually going to take this even a step further by putting a little bit of a stretch in there. You'll see what I'm talking about in half a second. Okay, right there, scale on the vertical 102. Okay, so now again, this might not work, but the pop there, this stretch does not work. So we'll go to the scale and leave it at negative 100, and the vertical maybe 102. So there's a little tiny pop. Okay, so To be clear, though, I don't like the scale. I think it's like a little gratuitous and it's too much of a good thing, you might say. But as far as taking a character and animating a head turn without having to do the tween, not too bad actually. The other guy is just looking at his head. Absolutely. Yeah, because remember, you got to keep the context in mind here. What's going on is this is a montage where the narrator's telling us about how Golek blamed the famine on Asher, and then this is the shot we're working on right now where the narrator is telling us that Golek convinced Vespigi to usurp the throne. So this whole shot is part of a montage, and the focus, when you're watching this, your focus is going to be completely here. This is anime 101. There is absolutely no reason for Vespigi to be moving. No reason for him to be moving. None at all. So yeah, to answer your question succinctly, exactly. All of the action is Golek. Okay, so again, if I was creating particularly if I was creating a cartoon that was, Family Guy or whatever, that's all 3/4 view stuff, this is how I would do it. Now, in this case, there's one thing here that I still don't like. There's a chop factor that this move from here to here is absolutely pointless. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this 100% and delete this key. And this is what you often find, is that it's just one of those less is more things. I mean, look at that. That's smooth as silk. The tween was not necessary. It just really, literally was not necessary. There is no tween needed there. So, there you go. We're going to have to animate his mouth. We're going to have to animate his eyes. And we're going to have to animate them fairly boldly. I think what I will do is I'm going to do it this way. Watch this. Okay, step one is I'm going to create a smart raster level. Okay? Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to, and as usual, I reserve the right to have this go badly. But what I think I'm going to do is take column 5 and parent it to column 4. Okay, the advantage you have with what I'm doing here that you don't have with the plastic tool is when you've got a level like this that's been manipulated by parenting, so that this has been scaled and rotated, and this is being changed exactly the way the head is being changed with these animation keys. Well, when you use the animate tool for that, you can still draw and paint directly into the X sheet, which means you can use the animated material as a guide to make sure you draw things in the right place, like I'm doing right here. Okay. So now if we look at the schematic, if we disconnect this, that's what I actually drew in terms of the full frame, is those dots right there. So that's totally useful. That's quite useful. Because what that should mean is that now his eyes are going to follow his head. Look at that. Great. That's exactly what we wanted. Okay. I want to do a little better. I'm going to actually erase that one and redraw it. I want to see that snaky, and I'm going to go ahead and cut a little piece out so that he's got some specular in his eyes. Not bad. I feel like this is a little out of position though. B key, yeah, that'll work. N key, actual size, and so now here's what we've got. Okay, the good news is the hardest part of this whole shot is done. Which is as usual, animating the guy's face. I do think I want to take the characterization. I want to make it even a little bolder though. So I'm going to hit the B key and punch this stuff up a bit. He's just a little too small on the screen for... I guess I could actually do it directly, couldn't I? And in this case, I'm going to modify the drawing it was derived from by making his, making his snaky expression even more snaky. He is one snaky guy. I love Golek because he's such a snaky guy. Okay, so we just want it to sit in the mix, as they say. If I hit the N key, this is the actual size. Okay, so N, this is the size of the frame that you would watch on TV, so to speak. Max, the first half hour was a page from my Spiral notebook talking about what the title of the live stream is, which is how to master anything in 2 years. So you may find that useful or you may not. And then the second half hour was, basically chit chat. And now we're just working on the current shot. So, but as I say, I'm punching up Golek here a little bit because this is derived from a much larger drawing from other scenes, and I really wanted to make it easier to see him on the screen. Frankly, another thing I think I could do, this is actually where it would sure be nice if we could do things like use a destructive curves tool. Seems to me I'm remembering there is actually a way to do that, but I just don't remember offhand. So I'm also punching up the whites of his eyes. It just stands out better, N key, boom. Yeah, that's pretty good. That's sitting pretty nice. Okay, so now we can come back here, and probably for our purposes, we'll turn, oh wait, that's his eyes, sorry. We'll turn that off, and we're going to do some rapid fire ink and paint. Okay, so boom, 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 boom. We're going to keep it a little bit loose. Probably a little bit of smoothing would be nice. Yeah, a little bit of smoothing, not too much. I'm not going to finish this out yet because I want to get his hand in there correctly first. Oops, going to sneeze. Sorry, guys. It is allergy season. I told you guys about that the other day. Okay, now I'm going to go here so that I can see where the frames end. Otherwise, I'm going to inadvertently wind up with a bunch of stuff that won't fill because it doesn't run all the way off the screen. And as you can obviously see here, Golek yeah, everything's fillable. Golek is actually really supposed to be behind Vespigi, which it looks like he is, so we're in good shape. So we're going to need his hair, we're going to need his garment, we're going to need the trim of his garment, which I believe is darker. I don't care about getting the colors exactly right. We do need flesh tone, so we'll steal that from the face. So we'll turn this back on right here, so that here we can hit the R key and sample that, and that way we get the correct flesh tone. Okay. General talk or only open tunes? Yeah. So the first, yeah, for sure, the first half hour was what you might call my life lessons for creative people kind of thing. You know, I hope people find it helpful and useful. Okay. So now I want to take half a second here and really get a little more careful. There, right there, there's a hiccup. Particularly because the hand is kind of used a lot in this shot, and I don't like that. I think it was ill-conceived, this idea of having his, you know, like that. So I'm gonna redo this more like just a closed fist, but we can see his fingers. So I'm going to do it like that. I think that maybe works a little better. Do we want to fill things in right away? Maybe. Let me look at the subsequent frames and see what we've got going here. Okay, so that I definitely want to redraw, with the caveat that I'm going to steal his hand from this shot. So cool. So I'm going to go ahead and, in fact, I think actually what makes more sense is I'm going to go ahead and put in, I'm going to kind of follow anime type practice here. Okay, so he's shaking there. Yeah, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna go ahead and allow these are gonna be repeats, obviously. So we'll go like this, Control C, Control V, stretch this to here. This is shot number 8. This is shot number 9. Okay. I'm talking about in the pencil test. That way, what I can do now is just have the fun of, okay, I don't want to do that. I want to start it over here. Otherwise, I won't know where to end the mark. I hope that made sense. Because his face is in the way, I don't want to have to keep turning the levels off and on. Okay, so here, theoretically, same shot. So what I'll do is I'll just go ahead and retrace it. That will give the animation a little bit more life, because it will change, but it's going to be mostly the same. So it'll have a little bit of that chatter in it, which feels pretty good. Here, same situation. Yep, we'll just get this all blocked in. And then here, obviously we've got a completely different pose. And turn the onion skins off. And I don't like this one. This doesn't feel right. Let's get rid of it. Okay, let's go here. So when I'm wanting to get a drawing right, I typically do it this way, where I, as I like to say, work from the known to the unknown. Okay. So now we're going to go wrinkle, 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 and we're going to literally whoops, that was a little bit of a large mark, wasn't it? Literally what? Animate each line is what I'm basically doing. I'm saying, okay, So again, you got this chatter, which you can get away with because remember, he's shaking his fist. Of course, his clothes are going to bounce around a little bit. And then here. So it's always this dance between, using the either onion skins or more usually just flipping to maintain the integrity of the continuity between drawings versus looking at each individual drawing and kind of insisting that it looks the way you want it to. Okay, so getting rid of his head so I can better see what I'm doing. All right, I better save my work. Save your work, or else Maria will spank you. Well, it actually happened the other day. I had a shot where I lost like an hour and a half of work because I wasn't saving. So just waiting for Tahoma 2D to save the scene. Save it, I say. Maybe I'll spend some time talking in funny little voices because people always ask me, where will you get your voices from? Well, good news, everyone. I get my voices from myself. No, that's not completely true. Obviously, there are going to be other voices in the show, but I mean, I am definitely aware of at least. Well, I'm aware of at least 3 roles that I will be playing. One of them is Asha. In all likelihood, I'm going to be Mal, which is pretty much my normal voice. And then there's Golik. Golik, who's loosely based on Edward G. Robinson. Yep, that's what I do. Okay, so I think what I'm going to do now is just animate this little transition here. And the reason I'm going to do that is because I don't want to keep battling with the fact that his head's in the way. So I'd rather take a minute and make sure that we've got closed shapes. Pretty much that did it. That's all I needed. Okay, so now, boom, here's our line. We're going to move fast here, folks. I'm going to zoom out one little notch so I can fit it all in on the screen. Okay, we're going to move fast. There's no good reason to move slowly here. Now, if you don't want to use onion skins, it's not a bad idea to use the field guide because, I mean, you can see it's actually quite helpful. I can be thinking about how this line animates relative to the straight line that's beside it. So that's definitely helpful. Now I'm going to let it move out a little bit. And when you think about animation, isn't that really kind of what you're doing? Is you're really thinking about how one line exists in space relative to another line. That's really, in other words, if you did every line correctly in terms of its position and whatnot, then the final result would be correct. It's really exactly the same, by the way, as this. I'm not on Twitch, no. So, like, if you look at the most recent oil painting I did, what you see is that you're really trying to smack in these really big brush, bold strokes where you don't necessarily have the context of the face in mind. If you're really close, oh, darn it, come on. If you say, well, this is a shape. I see this shape and I paint this mark. I'm bold, I'm courageous, I smack the mark in because I see it in my reference, either photo or my subject. And what you find happens is, if all the little, oops, I didn't mean to do that. If all the little individual shapes are correct, then the likeness will be correct. And if the likeness isn't correct, it is only because all of the individual little shapes are not correct. You measured something wrong. And it's never anything different. There is no other reason why a portrait doesn't come out. It's I kid you not. It is only one reason ever. So then the question becomes, how do I get good at measuring? And then, of course, matching value, matching hue. Of course, those things are important too. You got to get them all right. But if you want to eliminate variables, do your painting in black and white. Or burnt sienna and white. Actually, the Joe Biden picture was exactly that. It was almost all burnt sienna and white. There was actually very little of any other hue involved in the paint because I wanted to keep my life simple, for this particular exercise. Well, Zuko is being chirpy today. Not sure why he's being so chirpy. Okay, yep, that worked. Okay, I hate to use onion skins, but in this case, because it's such a pain in the rumperillious to deal with the fact that part of him is covered up. Obviously, I could turn the levels off. I could turn Vespigi off so that I can see what I'm doing. But there's really no reason to do that. I just need to get these shapes in here. This is what I was alluding to when I was talking about turning down Golik's head as well. Okay, so now here I want to be. This is where, I'm looking at the drawing and I'm going, I don't really like the way his shoulder is shaping up here. So despite the fact that from a okay, that was wrong as well. Despite the fact that from a tweening standpoint it seems about right, on its own as a drawing, doesn't feel right. So again, this is the tightrope you walk. Okay, and I'm going to turn the field guide off as well. Because I can, I'm going to go ahead and just start dealing with. This is what I did when I did that pencil test animation I posted last week. This is actually what I did a lot of. Just pick a line that needs to be animated in the context of the greater piece, and just get that line going in real time. Just, whoops, didn't mean to do that. All right, boom, boom, boom. Doesn't really matter much, folks. Oh, again, I just made the same mistake. It's because the drawing repeats in the animation. Okay, I think there's one more to go. Well, I guess maybe two. Nah, we'll just make it one. We'll just reduce it to this. I keep doing the same thing. Okay. And I guess we got a little bit more here to do. That's the one that was looking a little off. But at the same time, yes, when this shot gets picked apart, when it's all said and done, yeah, look at that. This is bad. This is bad. This sucks. Okay, sorry guys, but this sucks. Alright, so there is no option except to turn Vespigi off. We have a bad mistake here. And I don't think there's any way I'm going to do it without using onion skins. Unfortunately, since I'm not a huge fan of onion skins, but sometimes it's the best solution. Right here, it just completely fell apart. That was complete slop work on my part. Sorry. So you wind up with a smooth animation, but the problem is that the item that's being animated is growing. Yeah, we don't want that. So B. Okay, so let's go back here. And we'll go here, and we'll go ahead and onion skin it. Okay, that way we'll get... We want this to evolve a little bit, but not much. So this is really one of the quintessential cases where just tracing it tracing it's the right answer because it introduces a little bit of variation in the line that makes it chatter over time, which makes it sort of come to life a bit. But the overall volume is pretty much guaranteed not to change. Now here we can let that stretch out a little bit. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is kind of the same thing again on these. And we'll see how it goes. I, of course, as always, reserve the right to foul it up and, you know, decide that I missed the mark. But let's give it a crack. We'll turn the onion skins off and just kind of see. Let's turn Golik's head back up. Yeah, this will work. That chatter right there is perfectly fine because he's going to be shaking his fist, remember. Okay, and I see, well, okay. I was looking at the border of the head image and thinking that was going to present a problem as far as like flying off the page, but it's not because I'm on a different level with the hand. Okay, so now I think what probably would be most sensible here is to grab this sorry guys, the nose is going bananas. Okay, S Control V and then yep, S Control V, and I can, okay, I can onion skin this. Not bad. Okay, S Control V. Now, this is where it's going to go sideways because obviously his garment is wrong. So, but I think the fist is actually okay. Yeah, the fist is okay. I can see that. I don't know if you guys can picture that in your mind, but you can see if his fist was up here, you can kind of see where his elbow would be and stuff. Okay. So now, while I'm thinking about it, gee, Dave, you might want to consider cleaning this up a bit. You know, when everything's in motion to a degree, we can get away with it. But we don't want to be complete slop hogs either. So Control C, Control V. Yep. Okay. Control C, S Control V, and then this is going to come. You know, he's just shaking his fist. Okay, S Control V. And now we're going to really put this up here. We're stretching the limit a little bit anatomically, but I think we're okay. I think we're okay. So now let's just grab the B key, turn the onion skins off, and there's his like robe thingy. Smack that down there. Smack that down there. We have a lot of latitude on this particular frame because it's such a big popping change from where it was in the prior frame. We got to make sure this is closed, otherwise it won't fill. Okay. And now let's go up here and draw the evil Golik's hand. And I think we'll give a little space between this finger and this finger. Little space here as well. Okay, now that's obviously not quite working there, pal. Not quite working. Looks like Val's out checking the garden. Alright, N key. Did it work? Nah. Nope. I don't like it. I mean, it's okay, but I actually think this would make more sense and look better if his hand was more like closed. So, what is today? Is today Tuesday? I think it's Tuesday. Alright. I think with that I'm gonna... And we got 146. I don't know. I guess we could probably charge through the end. I'm saving my work right now. Okay. Let's just make sure everything's kind of moving right. Okay, yeah. Looks great. No problem. Just got to ink the... Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to ink this contour here because this is what would be reacting the most to the way he's moving. You know, it would kind of crumple up like that. Boom, boom, boom. Okay, here we'll come back to... Okay, and then here, just sneak a little bit of that in there. Boom, boom, boom. Okay, so here... Now I'm just trying to remember as best I can so that what we'll do, and again, sorry for the sniffles, guys. So by trying to remember, there's going to be a natural noise to it, obviously. Okay. So now what we'll do is we'll say, okay, well, here's that line. Boom. Boom. We'll go from here because I got to get his arm in there doing whatever it's going to do. Again, we're kind of ignoring the fact that there's a lot of lines that need to be connected here. But until I get his arm drawn, I'm spinning my wheels. Okay, so something like that. Something like that. Okay. What we got to do is be careful here so things aren't, as I said earlier, growing. Okay, let's go back. Okay, this is easy enough. Boom. And maybe a wrinkle or two. Again, pretty straightforward. This part, okay, there's the contour, so nice. Okay, so now let's connect the dots, so to speak. Let's go like this and go, obviously wrinkles. Let's let that transitional point, you know, because of his arm bending, grow. Okay, so here we're going to get a lot of wrinkle or pile up, you know, of the fabric. Let's go back to the top. Boom. Okay, something, yeah, that's okay. That'll fill correctly. That might not. Okay, so here we'll go like that, and no need to spend all day here fiddling. In this case, I think I'll just Okay, that did not look right, that line. I think maybe what we'll do is connect that there. Okay, yeah, that's a one frame tween, so I'm kind of going to get away with a little bit of murder here on my tween. That's okay. Sometimes you can do that. You know, unless things are actually growing and changing shape over time and giving away the illusion, which could definitely happen if I'm not careful here. So, yeah. Okay, let's back up. This I don't like. I am being a lazy bum here. And the only way to mitigate the problem, again, what we're talking about is this is growing. This is stupid. This is like, Dave, come on, dude. Really? Do your freaking job. Yeah, that's what this is. Okay, so scanning back through this, what I'm seeing is right here, we allowed the illusion to break. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, okay, we know fabric-wise this is where this needs to be. Something like that. So what we'll do is we'll just get that in there. What we know, you know, the old story, work from the known to the unknown. That worked. Okay, now what we'll do is we'll use that to determine what else needs to happen here with the fabric. So I'm going to say it's going to be like this. That can be like that. We've got a hole right there. Let's clean that up. Clean that up. Boom, boom. These little sketchy lines there don't really matter. They're okay. This is actually, I tell you, this is actually the part of animation I think I like the best. Is when you're kind of just popping in those little lines and letting the motion appear in front of you. It's pretty cool. Okay, again, this is the same situation here. We've got this wacky crossing line that doesn't really make sense. But I have a feeling, okay, and there's a hiccup too. When we zoom out and look at this, we're going to find out it actually worked pretty well in terms of, you know, mapping the motion. There we have another hiccup on our ink line. We're close though, folks, we're close. Wrinkle, a little bit of a tangent there, I'd say. Oops. Oh, I guess we're at the end. Wow. Sniffle, sniffle here. Says the sniffle man. Okay, so now some of you are objecting to the fact that it's obvious that the cut and paste occurred here. My strong suspicion is that is not going to be a problem. We're not going to see that. Everything's moving too fast. So let's hit the N key and remove the pencil test. Right? Remove the pencil test and see what we have. Boom. Okay. L key. What I don't like, and it's pretty egregious, is that. Look at that. Look at, even though I traced it, isn't that sad? Like, how do you screw up that bad there, Dave? Okay, so let's take Vespigi out. This has got to be fixed. This one's okay. This is not. Let's just chop this out. Isn't that funny? This one stupid line is what's wrecking everything. Control C, Control V, and I'm just going to allow that to move a little bit. And I'm going to hit Control C again so that I can just paste this in, maybe move it a little tiny bit. Close that up. So sorry about that. That's a pretty awful mistake, the way it was growing. Now this, from here on, I think it's okay. Isn't it funny how sometimes tracing just doesn't work out? How do you use such a thin brush? The striped shirt says. What do you mean how? I don't know what you mean by how do you use such a thin brush. When I look at my show, which is being done at Broadcast HD, when I look at the line work compared to other anime and stuff, this is just the line size that seems to be favored. There we go. This is not as egregious anymore. Okay, so fill tool. Let's actually do a fill check here real quick. Let's just do a fill check and make sure we're not going to get bit in the right there. Look at that. Look at that. Where is the problem? I suspect. Yep, there it is. This is just save you some grief. Go through and do the fill check and make sure everything's going to be closed shapes. Okay, and I need to look at my show. Get a beat on Golik's costuming. In the other screen. So I think what's going to be going on is this, and this is, by the way, to be very clear, this is absolutely the wrong color. Doesn't matter. We can change it after the fact. That's a little egregious. Yep. Okay, so this color is actually supposed to be not quite so dark, and definitely we want to guard against too much saturation. So this color is clearly quite off as well. It's supposed to be kind of an olive. Yep. So those who are going to now complain, well, why does Golik wear green? You guys can keep your comments to yourself. It's just his costume, for crying out loud. All right, get off my case. Later in the show, he has a similar costume, but his collar turns to, he has a red collar later in the show. When he's, well, 20 years later, actually, is what it is. Okay, we're getting there. Oh boy. Little hickey. Okay, so clearly we're going to have to do a shadow layer as well. So, but on balance, let's go ahead and crop that to the camera and see what we've got. In fact, let's just render the darn thing. Okay, so if we come back to the show, let's go back here. This is the context again. This is being narrated. There's a famine coming that hits. Golik is like, this is Asher's doing. I know it. But how? He feeds the poor. He's, you know, so he's defending Asher. And then this is the shot we're working on right now. As you can see, not horrible, but I swear the sleeve grew. Everything was fine up until the point where I trusted the original drawing. How do we fix that? Pretty easily, actually. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to take what worked and just do more of that. Okay, so here is where it falls apart. So I'm going to take color 0 and fill it. That just essentially fills it with transparency. Okay, I'm going to turn the Spiegel off. And now I'm going to go through, and it seems to me that everything was going, actually I want to erase that as well. Okay, so now I'm going to hit the S key. Everything was working fine until I started drawing it. It's just a quintessential animation mistake, really. Where you, why is this set to selective? We don't want it to be selective at the moment. Where you're just letting stuff change volume over time. If you're going to say, well, you know what, Dave, you really need to go take a course from AMB animation. Well, you're probably right, because I tell you, AMB, he doesn't particularly like me he wouldn't even know who I am, but since he banned me from his channel like 2 years ago. Shoot, that's not what I meant to do. S key, S key, S key. Control C, V, 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 V. This one's obviously going to have to be adjusted. Boom. Okay, so now I don't know if this makes sense for you guys, but let's grab this. Okay. Okay, there we have a problem. There we have a problem. All right, fill tool. Little hiccup there. So what I started to say earlier and never did is that we're going to have to definitely do some shadows on Golik. And oh my gosh. Okay, stop everything. Stop everything. Stop everything. This is, I'm glad this happened. This is a great illustration of what can go wrong in animation, and it's got, I swear it's got to do with, I'm not sitting here just drawing. I'm not obeying what I know is right in front of my face in terms of the freaking drawings. I'm trying to tween this stupid animation. And so let this be a lesson to you guys. This is what happens when you ignore your own instincts as far as just freaking drawing and try to make the shapes match. You know, it doesn't contradict what I said earlier about portraiture, where if the shapes match, the final result is right. That is true. Let's be clear. The shapes are not working. And the reason the shapes aren't working is because you would never draw what I have here. You would never draw that. It's okay here. If we put Vespucci back in, it's okay. And basically right there it falls apart. So I am going to not try to do any tweening. This is going to be gone. And I'm not going to try to close the shapes either. What I was doing earlier is I was trying to close the shapes by taking Vespucci out. I'm not going to try to close the shapes. I'm just going to try to get the shapes right, and then I'll go take Vespucci out and close them. Okay? I hope this makes sense. So what I'm saying is, all I care about is that this looks real. And actually, that makes more sense. He would... Okay. Yeah. This like makes way more sense. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and go... What's really bugging me here, actually, is I'm feeling like... Yeah, I see what the problem is. Right here, his garment should be appearing. Like that. I mean, duh. Okay, and now it could fall back to a little thinner here. But again, we got to make the drawing right. If the drawing's not right, it's all going to look stupid. So here, and what I'm trying to do is the same thing I try to do when I paint, actually, is I'm trying to be vigilant of when it's starting to go wrong. And what happened there was when I just did the tweens without thinking like a guy that's trying to draw something that looks like a human being, you know, moving. You know, technically the tweens are kind of sort of correct, but the drawing looks stupid. This is so much better. I will almost guarantee you this is going to wind up looking like a lot better. Okay. With one caveat that I see potentially coming, is that it could be that we're going to see a problem when it snaps from this to this, because that border just shows up. So that's really not acceptable. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go like this and this and let it emerge a little more slowly. That probably makes like way more sense. Okay, so let's give it a try. I'm kinda gonna trust. Oh, come on, really, dude? Seriously, pal? Eh. Oh, the things that go wrong. Well, this is where it would be better if I wasn't always working at HD. So, stop. That's a Tahoma thing right there. I just hit the D key. I swear to God, I promise I did. And Tahoma didn't catch it. This is what I was complaining about last week. It's one of the real, not a bug, but just a flaw in Tahoma 2D, is how whatever it does to catch hotkeys, I don't know if it's on a timer or what, but it often misses hotkeys that you definitely pressed. But, yeah, life goes on. Okay, so now what we want to do is isolate this level so that we can close this shape. So it doesn't matter what we do because this is all hidden by this speaky. And we can even use the green color to do it with. It just doesn't... okay, hold on. Yep, I guess I'm right. That is hidden. So F key. Okay, so again, as always, a caveat. The caveat is we're going to need some shadows for Vespeaky. But I think we're in pretty good shape. I will bet you, as they say, dollars to donuts, that this is going to look a lot better. So let's just go ahead and jump back to the show and see. Let's just go back and see, and what? Okay, this is interesting. Oh, this is... no kidding. This must have been originally... at 24 frames a second, maybe. Yeah, so the whole thing's moving too slowly. This is an interesting hiccup that I had not considered. 0.5. So, unfortunately, I may have just discovered a problem with this shot that I didn't even realize was a problem. Okay, which is this. The whole shot takes 5 seconds with the fade in and fade out. And so what needs to happen is everything's got to be delayed before it starts playing about 1 second. 1,000, 2, 1,000. And then it starts dissolving, and then it needs a hold. Okay, so let's come back here. Alright, so this should not even begin till about there. And then the whole thing needs to be 5 seconds long, which would be 40 frames. Which means we're probably going to have to reload it into the edit. That's interesting. Okay, so I'm going to jump back to the edit. Well, these are the things that can go wrong from time to time. Okay, so we look at the properties here. How many frames have we got? It's only 24, so this actually has to be... well, I tell you what. This is one of the shortcomings of Vegas, is it doesn't... once you bring in an image sequence, it doesn't make it particularly easy to literally not take the clip out of the edit, but yet have it point to a completely different image sequence. Like, well, all I really want to do is change this from 24 to 40, and you can't edit that. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to do it this way. This is a real clunker for the reason that the we kind of have to cut it into the show to make sure it worked, only to potentially find out that we have a fair amount more work to do. So that's a bit of a pain in the rump. But okay, 67. Hello. So we got to go all the way back here. And as you can see, we've got two image sequences that are 67. One's 24 frames long. One is 40. So there's the 40 version. Properties of this needs to disable resampling. And it looks to me like we're still just a little short, but I think in this case we can probably stretch it out just a tiny bit. Now the question is, yeah, ripple editing is turned on, so I just turned it off. And of course what this also means, by the way, is that we've lost everything about the shot that made it work, such as the push in and all the rest, so we have to recreate that here. So a little bit of a bummer. Little bit of a bummer. Alright, so there we go. And if this isn't like magical, it's not magical. It's okay, but it's not magical. Number one. Okay, so I'm going to quit. I'm basically sick of working on this. I'm ready for a break. It's been a couple hours. Hey, is there a reason you use Tahoma instead of OpenTunes? Yes. The difference in maturity of the code is nominal, frankly. The bugginess factor, they're both about the same. And they're both extremely stable anyway. So the difference with Tahoma is that you can cut and paste from other applications across the clipboard, which means I can do some art, or in this case what I actually did actually happened in the shot that I'm working on, is that I came back here, I took this shot right here, well it actually wasn't this one, it was this one. I took this shot, cut it to the clipboard like that, and then I came over to Tahoma and just clicked in an empty cell and hit Control V. Give it half a second to decide what it's going to do. And then I cleaned out the background. I just erased everything except his face. And now I'm going to hit undo and take that out. And then that face is what I actually used in this shot. I punched it up a little bit by tightening up because he shrunk down so much that I darkened the outlines. But basically being able to reuse assets by cutting and pasting across the clipboard is exactly and precisely the key reason why I use Tahoma instead of OpenTunes. There's one other thing which will actually be coming up for this shot in just a second, which is if you're going to use a vector level in Tahoma, I do not believe that the following feature has made it into the OpenTunes codebase, which is, I'm waiting for Tahoma to save, which is this. Come on, Tahoma, save, save, save. Waiting for Tahoma to save. Waiting for, okay. I'm going to create a vector level that I'm going to use for shadows, okay? And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to just hit the B key and I'm just going to draw shapes like this, okay? And then I can quiet down this level to about 18 or so, 14, 15, 16 maybe. Okay, and so the vector levels give me the ability to use auto close, auto group, and auto fill in order to just draw in filled shapes instantly, like so. Okay, so which I use a lot for shadows. You can also use it on backgrounds where you draw in a shape that's the local color of the thing you're painting, and then you actually use multiple levels of transparent black or white to just build in shadow and highlight. So I do not believe that feature is the auto close and auto fill, I don't think that's made it into OpenTunes. If somebody, um, yeah. So anyway, those are the two reasons: cut and paste across the clipboard, and the ability to use vectors that are automatically filled when you draw the shapes. Those are the two things I like about Tahoma. Other than that, it's identical as far as I'm concerned to OpenTunes. So in this case, actually, what I just did there was not what I intended to do. So I'm gonna hit undo, go back here. So yeah, this is in fact precisely what I need to do on this shot still. That remains is to go ahead and work in some shadows. You know, just your quintessential anime style shadows. Now there's another aspect of the shadow thing that I don't know for sure if it is in OpenTunes or not, which is the following. In Tahoma, if I set the opacity of the level, which I'm doing here for shadows, and I often do it this way, then you can go into your scene settings and click Enable Column Color Filter and Transparency for Rendering. And what that does is when you actually render, the transparency of the column is preserved in the render, which means you don't have to use, like say, the Multiply INO filter or effect in the effects schematic in order to add transparency and now if you're going to draw shadows and you want them to be clamped to your character so you can't accidentally draw outside the lines, for example, then you need to use a filter in the schematic. But usually I'm just careful about how I paint, and you know, by just kind of following the lines and not being stupid, normally I can get a nice shadow like so. So those are the two reasons. And then the fan says, do you ever use Blender Grease Pencil? Yeah, there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of shots in this show that were done in Blender Grease Pencil. This, all this stuff of Asher is Blender Grease Pencil. That's all Grease Pencil. This shot is probably mostly Grease Pencil. There's a lot of stuff in this show that's Grease Pencil. There's a lot of Krita, there's a lot of Grease Pencil, and there's a lot of OpenTunes. But on balance, it's turned out that for the vast majority of the work, the way I work, the Tahoma seems to be the right tool for the job most of the time. So, all right, guys, that's it for me today because I am sick of working on it for the moment and I want to take a break. So, that's it. As you guys know, we'll take one last glance at what we did here. And as you guys can see, it's still not quite perfect. It's not bad though. The thing that's bothersome to me is that it looks better here playing back than it does in the show. That's bugging me a little bit. Let me look here. Oh yeah, we gotta get past all this Asher stuff. So yeah, this shot right here, and it's mainly the arm. This arm has been a pox on me. I'm actually thinking about deleting this arm and just having it hanging down by his side because there's really no reason his arm needs to be around Vespigi. It's a little bit of a helpful device, but it's not that important. But anyway, whether I leave the arm up or not, it's got to be fixed. The chatter that I thought might work is not working. And so that's that. Anyway, with that, I will say I'm done for the moment. And thanks, Maria. And so I will say that, as I often do, that there will be more later. And by the way, if you guys want to know the secret for how you can master any skill in 2 to 8 years, the good news being that you can, the bad news being that it's going to take you 2 to 8 years, then just watch the first half hour of this particular live stream where I went through that from my now legendary spiral notebook. So with that, I will say goodbye, and as you guys know, there will be more